Welcome to the Babbles Nonsense podcast, where I'm your host, Jonna Grimes, and we're here to discuss any and all things, but especially the shit that I want to talk about. Because let's face it, I have a lot of shit to say, and after all, you are listening to my verbal diary. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode, guys. Did you know that March is Women's History Month? Because I didn't know that until I listened to a podcast earlier this week, and I wish I would have known that because I would have started out my podcast with some badass women, which I did in March, but I would have introduced them that way. I had Monique on last week, and this week I have a good friend, Kari, who is a nurse practitioner at Advanced Life Care. She is also my nurse practitioner because I trust her with my thyroid issues, and it's hard to find a doctor or a nurse practitioner that actually listens to you and listens to your symptoms despite lab values, which me and Kari are going to dive into in this podcast. I did do a Q&A on my Instagram story, so hopefully I will get all your questions answered. If I forget some questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, send me a DM, and we will try to get those answered for you guys. So we're just going to get started. So Kari, how are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
So she is off today. Our schedules are so crazy, so it's hard to get around. But I want to know, so how did you get into loving hormone and thyroid health? Like, what made you to say, is it because you noticed a trend when you started in the clinic that you were just like, this is so underdiagnosed and you just wanted to help people? Or have you always loved hormone?
I think it started since I've had hypothyroid since I was 16.
Okay.
So, the typical symptoms, weight gain, fatigue at a very young age. And people, even my pediatrician told my mom that I was lazy or I just needed to get outside. And to understand that, and then really when I went to school to be a nurse practitioner, I learned a little bit about thyroid. They teach you a little bit, the basics. And so I did a lot of self-research. And then when I started working at Advanced Life Clinic, we do hormone therapy. And so that's when I really delved into it and became specialized in bioidentical hormones.
Okay. So you got diagnosed with hypothyroidism at 16. That's pretty young.
Very young.
Did you have Hashimoto's with the autoimmune disease, or did you just have straight hypothyroidism?
Well, they never checked for that. I don't have my TPOs negative. I don't have anything now.
Okay.
So my mom, it's familial most likely.
Okay.
We know there are some links. So my mom, my sister, my grandfather.
All have it?
And I, yes.
Okay. So let's go. You were talking about the symptoms. So you started gaining weight, having fatigue at 16. And then did you notice, because I'm sure you're pretty intuitive being a nurse practitioner. And even though you weren't a nurse practitioner at 16, I feel like we all kind of, if you're in healthcare, we're kind of intuitive and we know. And did you kind of know something was wrong, or did you just say, oh, maybe I should work out more. Maybe I should eat better?
Well, in the beginning, I was like, okay, maybe the doctor's right. I respected the doctor as we're taught to do. What the doctor says is what we're supposed to do, and there's no, deviating from that. So I did that. But when you're doing that for a year and you're still gaining weight, and really, I thought I had mono for a year.
Because you wanted to sleep all the time.
I wanted to sleep all the time. And finally, they took me to a family practitioner, not a pediatrician, and she immediately tested me, and I was definitely hypothyroid. My TSH was like 16.
Oh, wow. So back then, you're not that old. I'm just saying back then, because when I got diagnosed, because I'm 33 now, I think I got diagnosed when I was 23 or 24. So even back 10 years ago, they weren't testing for free T3, free T4. Did she only test your TSH, or did she test your others? Do you know?
And I wish I would have known that, right? Because at that time I didn't know.
Yeah.
From what I can probably guess, it was probably the TSH. She was a family practitioner in a very small town in Tennessee.
Oh my gosh, where?
Lewisburg.
Okay, because I was like, Winchester is where I got diagnosed.
So at least but these doctors, and she'd been a family practitioner for a long time. She's now since retired, but I think she paid attention to her patients. That's why she did so well in our community, because she really listened. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the difference, because when I got diagnosed, I went to a internal medicine doctor, and my TSH wasn't that high. It was like 3.5, but I was having all the symptoms, the weight gain, the hair falling out, the fatigue. And then I was having these weird symptoms of metabolic disorder where my hands turned orange, which was weird. And he only tested my TSH, and he said, there's nothing wrong. Your TSH is 3.5. And so that's when I started doing my own research, because I was like, something is off with my body, because I'd always worked out. I had always ate pretty good, and I was gaining all this weight, where I went to an endocrinologist in Huntsville, and he basically told me if I wanted to lose weight, maybe I should work out and eat better.
Ouch.
And I was like, Wow. Okay. So I did my own research and I went to my family nurse practitioner that I had in my small town, Winchester. And I was like, hey, can you draw my free T3, my free T4, my TPO antibodies? And she was like, sure, I guess. My free T3 came back 0. My free T4 was normal. My TSH was just 3.5, which was normal high. And then my TPO antibodies were like 1,000, 2,000. And she was like, I don't even know what to do with this because I've never drawn these labs before. And but if you don't know to ask your doctor to do that, like, how do you know? Like, so I know obviously you know, but if people are out there and they're experiencing the weight gain, the fatigue, the hair loss, and something's off and they know something's off, how do you tell them to go ask your doctor, request these labs?
You go in and tell them your symptoms, and then just say, hey, I would like to check. And you don't, a lot of times, especially with physicians, maybe not as much with nurse practitioners, you have to really tell them, I'm feeling these symptoms and can we check a metabolic reason? Maybe not tell them the exact test because sometimes they're going to push back on that. But because we want to check thyroid, you want to check vitamins. There's several things, right? We can't just say it's always thyroid. Mm-hmm. But thyroid is a huge proponent of all the symptoms like we were just talking about, which include, the hair loss too is a huge one. And then fatigue, cold hands and feet. That's a huge one. People always say, oh, I have cold hands and feet. Some people just say I have Raynaud's. Someone diagnosed them with Raynaud's and never checked anything.
Yeah.
And individual symptoms, everyone's different. And I liked what you had just said when you had just said about, these numbers are normal. Mm-hmm. And I think we've discussed this previously. What is normal?
Yeah.
So do people realize that when you get your labs and you look on the right of your labs, it says reference range?
That was my next question for you. Like, what's the difference between reference range and optimal range?
Huge difference. And that drives me crazy. So every time when you come to my clinic, I'm going through the labs, I'm going to go to the right of that and it's going to say reference range. And every lab has a different reference range. And people don't realize that every lab has a different reference range. It's based on your age, your sex at that lab. And so if you look at your numbers and then you compare it to a different lab, even from 2 labs in the same city, they're going to be different. Mm-hmm. And so you have to know what's optimal. And optimal for me is what research tells me. I'm all research-based, all evidence-based research. Research will guide you in the right direction. And also just listening to your patients. So that reference range is a reference. That's exactly what it is. That's not, I have to stick within this number and this number. That's ridiculous.
Yes.
Because everybody's body is different.
Yes.
I can't say this is your reference range is, like you just said, 3.5 is normal for TSH, but that might not be normal for you. And obviously your pituitary wasn't responding because your pituitary puts out your thyroid stimulating hormone. Mm-hmm. So your thyroid was being attacked, autoimmune by your Hashimoto's, but your pituitary wasn't responding.
Yeah, because my T3, and like they even sent me to an endocrinologist at Vanderbilt who was supposedly the lead of the Endocrinology Association, and she even looked at me and said, I've never seen labs like this. Because for those that don't know, your free T3 and free T4 should be opposite of your TSH. And so for one to be low and the other one not to be high is very rare. And so like I like what Kari said, because when I do go to her, and I'm sure, like I was thinking about this earlier today. This is just a sidebar. So I think, and I know people are going to probably give me so much hate for this, if we drew our labs at certain intervals in our lives, like let's say age 5, age 10, 15, like just not random labs, but like a specific set of labs, like your liver enzymes, your thyroid, your vitamin levels, your hormone levels, to kind of have what your baseline is, I think that would help down the road. So if you do develop an autoimmune disease and now it's like, let's say my TSH was always 0.5 because I'm a go person. I have always been lean. I've always had like so much energy. And then when I got diagnosed with thyroid stuff, I was complete opposite of who I was. But let's say my TSH was always 0.5 when I was younger, but we don't know that because I've never had my labs drawn because I was always healthy. But now it's 3.5. That's very high for going from 0.5 to 3.5. But if we knew what it was, we could shoot for what it was. Does that make sense? Or is that stupid?
No, I completely agree. So I have a lot of young men and women come to me at 18, 20, and I ask them, when's the last time you had labs? Well, how many of us have had labs when we're young? We don't, because no one wants a needle. No one wants to be stuck. And I do understand that, but we all need to check that baseline. And so I always encourage them to start at that age. And I do encourage yearly labs because things change. I mean, and I've had a young lady who had an eating disorder and we were treating that, but then she also had thyroid issues, which was not helping her eating disorder. So you have to really look at metabolic reasons. And we, for some reason, miss the metabolic portion of our healthcare.
So when I got diagnosed, and now looking back, I was going through, and this is just more of a me question that I have for you, because I've thought about it. So I'm trying to figure out my words here. Okay, so obviously America has a lot of thyroid issues compared to other countries. Do you think there is some correlation, the foods we're eating, like gluten and dairy and things like that offset, and all these chemical-laden foods?
Completely, yes. I mean, it would make, if you do look at it and you look at what we eat, we have vitamin deficiencies. Mm-hmm. Every one of my patients comes in with a vitamin D deficiency, vitamin B deficiencies, because we don't eat the way we should eat. We eat processed foods. What's in processed food? Chemicals. This is not, we are not meant to eat these things.
Yeah.
And yes, those chemicals can cause not just gluten and dairy. You have to remember there's a lot more out there.
Yeah.
We put all these fillers in food.
Mm-hmm.
And so those fillers can cause autoimmune responses, inflammation in our body. And so you do need to be careful. And, as we talked about thyroid, there are certain minerals that we can take and amino acids that can actually help boost our thyroid function before we even go down the road of diagnosing somebody, because we don't get those in our food like we should.
So speaking of that, like, what supplements do you recommend to your thyroid patients to help them boost their thyroid or anything like that?
Selenium.
Okay.
So selenium is a great supplement that you would use, and then you take that along with inositol. Both of those are going to help you convert.
Okay.
To increase your free T3 and free T4. And they're natural supplements. Now you do have to be careful with any supplement. You can go overboard. So recommendations are 200 milligrams of the selenium. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the inositol.
Okay.
But I think it's 100 milligrams, but they do make thyroid support supplements, and I have seen it help.
Okay.
And then also figuring out if it is related to inflammation. So if you have some sort of inflammatory response going on in your body, trying to work on that, whatever that might be, and other hormones. So if your other hormones, thyroid's a hormone. Mm-hmm. If your other hormones are out of balance, your thyroid can be out of balance. And so we have to balance everything. It's not just thyroid. There's so many other hormones in our body we have to look at.
Yeah. And so speaking of those other hormones, like, I came to you and we fixed my thyroid and got it stable and balanced out. But then I started having similar symptoms, because a lot of things can mimic the thyroid that we found out, like low vitamin D, which mine was. So I got on a vitamin D supplement that helped my energy. But then we tested my estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and they were low, like all of them.
Which you wouldn't expect because you're young.
Yeah. Like, I'm 33. My estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone were all low. And I talked to you because I know I felt bad, like I was doing something to cause that. And you had told me that you had seen this a lot in younger patients lately. What do you think the cause of that is?
There could be a lot, just like we just talked about, toxins, what we're eating, environmental. A lot of it is environmental, of course, and stress.
Do you think that birth control plays any kind of into this? Because I know that I got on birth control, like the pills, when I was 16, and I probably took those for 10 years. And then I got an IUD, and then I had my IUD taken out 4 years ago, I think. So I would have thought that my hormones would have stabilized by now, but they weren't. Mm-mm. And I was very hesitant to go on hormone replacement because, number one, guys, I freak out about everything. So I know I texted Kari a lot. I was like, am I going to die? So, but like, Kari had to tell me, like, so these are not your mother's hormones. So Can you explain the new hormones? Like, you said something about bioidentical hormones. Is there a difference?
Oh, definitely. Okay. So years ago, and even with birth control and hormone replacement, we gave lots of hormones, because we're learning. This is all a learning curve. And this was 20, 30 years ago, and that was like your mother's hormones, Prema and Pravera, which was synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. Well, so we know synthetic hormones are not metabolized or not used in our body the same as bioidentical. And there's a lot of research on both of those. But the research with synthetics did show links to issues like increased cancers, increased thickening of the lining of the uterus, other things that maybe not lead to cancer but are dangerous in older life, and blood clots and all these. That's what you hear. But we were using really high doses. Mm-hmm. And now if we look at birth control, we're realizing things are changing. You don't need those high numbers. And hormones can cause, that's in birth control, that's hormones, can cause side effects from, maybe stopping your body from producing its own, to even causing anxiety.
Yeah. And that's funny that you say that, because when I was 16 or even 20 to go get my birth control pills, I didn't question the doctor and say, but this is a hormone. Like, you don't think, isn't that weird? Like, so even when I take my thyroid medicine, I don't say, I'm taking a hormone today. Like it does, I don't even second guess it. But then when someone's like, well, you may need to take a little progesterone, that's why you're having night sweats. That's why you're not sleeping well. And which I was. I was like, I'm just anxious. I don't know what's going on. And Kari was like, no, your hormones are low. And then I was like, but I'm scared to take this because you hear so many bad things, but no one talks about the bad things. Like my thyroid medicine could easily flip me over to hyperthyroidism, but I don't sit there and worry about it all day.
And every medicine has side effects.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there is trade-offs for everything, and every medicine could have a side effect, but if it is causing you to be symptomatic, then you have to weigh that, right? And yes, there are risks to everything, but the risks that we learned 20 years ago from that Prema and Provera, or 30 years ago now from that Prema and Provera study, they're not the same, right? And there's so many studies now. There's thousands of studies on bioidentical hormones now that disprove all of that research 20 years ago, but we're still stuck on that.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're taught in school. I mean, literally, I think we're taught like 2 lines in school.
It's true.
About hormones, and then we just go on.
But you've done continued research and everything.
Every year.
Yes,
every year I get updated because it changes.
Yeah.
And my job is to know the updated research so that I can treat my patients better.
Agreed. So since we were talking about treatments, so we're kind of flipping back and forth, guys, here. So treating estrogen and testosterone and progesterone, if it's low, you do bioidentical hormones. And is that pill, cream? Do you do the pellets? Like
it's based off you. So everyone's different.
Okay.
It depends on what stage you're in your life, what your plans are, and what your levels are. So I offer all of the above.
Okay.
I don't do anything synthetic. But I do creams. Everything's compounded at a compounding pharmacy. That way I can make it my dose. So compounding pharmacies, if you don't know what those are pharmacies in our communities that are regulated pharmacies, just like CVS and Walgreens. But they order the medications themselves and then they put it together in that pharmacy for you. So I can make whatever dose of whatever medicine I want. And they're regulated so I can pick what I want, what you need for you, instead of having to go commercially and say, this is all I have available and we have to give this to you, even though it might not be the right dose. So yes, there's creams, there's sublingual tablets, there's something called troches, which is a waxy tablet that dissolves sublingually. And then there are pellets.
Okay.
So pellets are, if people don't know what pellets are, they're small compressed hormone that are implanted in the gluteal area. And they slowly in your body, over 6 months, work on your hormones, and then they slowly go down. So there's good and bad to every one of those. Yeah. And so I present that to every one of my patients.
Yeah. I
present what I recommend and then what I recommend and why I recommend it, but I present both sides of everything because I think you and I have talked about this before. This isn't a dictatorship, right? Yeah. This isn't me saying, this is what you're going to do. And this is no matter what. No, I'm going to give you all the options and then we're going to work together to find the best option for you.
Which is why, number one, I chose you as my nurse practitioner. And I think that you're amazing because you do listen to me and we do have a discussion and you make me feel better about my choice versus I have been to doctors where it is a dictatorship. And it's like, so for example, my thyroid, when I finally get diagnosed with my thyroid and everyone saw that I was having hypothyroid symptoms and my T3 was low, and my TSH was borderline high, all I would be prescribed by this one doctor was Synthroid. And I was like, yeah, but is this even going to help? Synthroid's just a T4 medication, and I never felt better taking it. But they said, I will not prescribe you T3 medicine or a natural desiccated thyroid, which is another like bioidentical hormone, I guess. And he was like, if you choose to take that, then I can no longer see you. Like I was told that I could not come back.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So like, I know some people had asked, like, what do you treat thyroid with? Which I know everyone's individualized, but what is your preferred treatment with thyroid? What have you seen work the best in your clinic?
Well, this year's been a tough year for thyroid.
Yes.
So there are some commercially available desiccated, which is bioidentical thyroid. And this year we've had some issues. The companies who are making these have had issues, keeping the correct thyroid hormone in them. And there are 3: Armour, Nature-Throid, and NP thyroid. Every one of them, Armour was a few years ago, had issues. NP thyroid had issues this year, and then Nature-Throid was completely taken off the market this year. So it's been very difficult to regulate. So truthfully, what I would love is compounded.
Yeah.
However, compounded thyroid is so expensive.
It is.
Because first of all, the medication that they have to get is expensive. And then you have to be very careful with compounded thyroid because a little bit off, we're talking about micrograms, that could completely there's been cases where compounding pharmacies have made mistakes. And so you have to go make sure you're going to the correct compounding pharmacy, then know what they're doing. And not all compounding pharmacies will make it, but people can afford $200 a month for their medication. That's not reasonable.
No.
So that's what I would love when it becomes more affordable.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I use a lot of NP thyroid right now.
Okay.
Because Nature Thyroid's off the market. I don't even have a choice. And I use Armor too.
Okay.
In rare cases, I do use Synthroid and Cytomel. I don't like it, but sometimes I have to. Right?
No, I mean, like, and so I've played around with it. So when I moved to Nashville for a year, I couldn't find a doctor that would prescribe me Nature Thyroid. They said no. They would prescribe me Synthroid and Cytomel. But every single time I've been taken off my Nature Thyroid, which is my preferred medication, but like you said, it's not available. And the reason why I like Nature Thyroid so much is because it does have that no fillers, gluten-free, dairy-free for their Hashimoto's patients, because if you have autoimmune diseases, they say to stay away from those things. We don't really know. There's not a lot of research out on that yet to say it's truly a thing or not. I don't know. But they only put me on Synthroid and Cytomel, and every single time, even though the dosage was the same, every single time they would switch me, boom, hypothyroid again. Even though it's T4, T3.
And sometimes I have to use one of these desiccated thyroids, and because they're a specific amount in each one. So 1 grain has 9 of T3, 9 micrograms, and 28 of T4. But if all I have is these available doses.
Yeah.
So I have had to recently, because I don't get to choose right now, like we were talking about, I have to add either Synthroid into that mix to get enough T4, or add Cytomel into that mix. And I don't want to, but I have to get the patients feeling better, and I have to get their numbers correct, which is something else. I don't know. I'm sure there's a question about that. But I kind of wanted to delve into the numbers and optimal.
Yes.
So optimal, as we were talking earlier, we kind of got off track there, but optimal is optimal based on research, right? So 3.5 to 4.5 is what research states is where most people feel their best in their free T3. But that doesn't mean that's what I have to keep you at.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of patients who they are optimal at 5 or 5.2, and that's okay. That's where they are optimal at. And so you have to look at the patient. These, like we just said, they're reference ranges. If that's where you are best, as long as we're not going over that line and going to hyperthyroid, then that's where we keep you.
Well, I know that when I was talking to you, because we had to switch me from Nature Thyroid to NP thyroid, which, there's some weeks there that you have to play with it. And my labs came back, and my free T3, I think was like 4. And I think our reference range that we use here in Huntsville was 4.2. So we were like teetering on that line of being over what the reference range, and I'm using quotes, guys, was. But I was feeling fatigued and gaining weight. And I was like, something's off. I don't feel right. And you said, let's just go up. I trust you. You know what hyperthyroid symptoms are, which if y'all don't know, it's like you'll have palpitations, you'll feel anxious. Sometimes you get chest pain, shortness of breath, and you're having diarrhea. Like, you kind of know.
Yeah,
and especially me being a nurse and dealing with this for over 10 years, I kind of do know, like, I know when I am there, and I just skip a couple of doses. But no, we went up, and I've been fine since. Like, I haven't had any of those symptoms. We haven't drawn my labs yet, which is going to be my next question. Someone asked, how often do you have to check your labs?
Well, if you look at traditional medicine, they say once a year. Well,
no,
that is not. Okay, because over that year, things change. Your body changes.
Yes.
I mean, as our bodies change, whether it's due to stress or age, or other life issues, then we need to check it, because we got to change it. It's going to go up and down. I recommend at least every 3 months. Now, if we make a change to your thyroid, 6 weeks after we make that change, because it takes at least 6 weeks for that to show up in our labs.
Yeah. And then I guess if someone's having symptoms, then you would say, let's check before we change, obviously before we change
so
anything.
if let's say it's been 3 months and you've been stable for several years, but all of a sudden at month 2, you're saying, okay, I'm something's not right. Either I'm fatigued, or the opposite, I'm having these weird chest pains or shortness of breath or increased anxiety. Then I'll say, let's just come in. Let's just draw a quick lab. And labs, by the way, are not, there's ways to get labs paid for that are not expensive. So we work with a local hospital, and I'm able to get the full thyroid panel for $10.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's not, because you have to think about that. And that's cash pay, but that does add up.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if someone's going to be charged $100 each time, that's not reasonable.
Yeah.
but I'd want to be able to give my patients that decreased price in their lab so we can check it. And that's what's best for them, because if I know what their numbers are, then I can treat them appropriately.
Agreed. And so is there a point where you could go to that recommended once a year, like lab draw? Or is that still too far?
It depends. If you've been stable, if you've been stable for 2 years on your thyroid, on the same dose,
okay,
then I would consider going to once a year. I still really like every 6 months.
Yeah.
But I would consider once a year, as long as you understand the symptoms of both hypo and hyperthyroid, and that you know that you need to come to me.
Okay. And then someone asked, is there a way, they did ask, is there a home option for treating thyroid and a home option for lab draws?
Now, we'll start with for treating. I mean, there are options to optimize your overall health, which could optimize your thyroid. Like we had discussed earlier, there are some thyroid support supplements like inositol and selenium. Overall, eating healthy, getting those possible inflammatory food items out of your system, and eliminating stress, because we know stress causes a cortisol reaction, and that can cause inflammation in our body. And so there's a lot of things we can do as far as that goes. But no, there's no actually home treatment, I would say, if you have true hypothyroid, not that research tells me. And because I am all research based. The next question about home thyroid testing, I should say like, because it's not about like, it's about science. I do not think that, based on what I've read, that the saliva labs are accurate.
Okay.
There's a lot of controversy about it. Yes, it is so easy. And I hope that we can get them more accurate, because that would, obviously, I think people would get their labs done more at a younger age if we could do that. But it's just not as accurate, because it's based on what have you eaten that day. If you have a dry mouth, then you're not going to get an accurate. If your mouth is too moist, you're not going to get an accurate number.
And I guess, would it depend on the time of the day too?
It could, but I mean, I don't really know much about saliva labs, so I don't want to go, because I really have not researched it, because from all that I have read in the last few years, it's not where it needs to be. So I haven't spent my time reading on those things, but I don't recommend that. I do still recommend blood.
Okay. And then this is something I just thought about. So I know I started taking my thyroid medicine at night, and people don't realize that there is some things you have to avoid when you're taking thyroid medicine. And the reason why I started taking it at night, because it was easier for me, because I get up and immediately breakfast and drink coffee. So can you tell everyone why we switched me to the night versus day, and what you have to avoid and all that jazz? So
as far as thyroid, the first thing is it needs to be taken, if you do it in the morning, at least 30 minutes before food or caffeine. And the caffeine part is where a lot of my patients were missing. They weren't eating, but we all go get that cup of coffee or whatever our caffeine source is in the morning. And yes, it still works, but it decreases your absorption. And that's what's the big deal, because if you're taking it, I want you to get the full dose.
Yeah.
And I've seen where once the people take it correctly, their levels completely change. They didn't realize, they weren't told prior to coming to me that they should take it a special way. Lactose. You have to be careful. You don't take lactose. You're going to decrease your absorption. Minerals like magnesium, vitamins, you don't take it. I say 4 hours for those things, because research says that it can be 2 hours, but for those, if you're going to take something like a magnesium or a multivitamin, I would take it 4 hours. So taking it at night can be good for a lot of people, and it's 2 hours after food or caffeine.
Yeah.
On those other things that we just mentioned, the magnesium and vitamins, I would take it 4 hours after, but most of us don't take those at night.
Yeah.
But definitely 2 hours after food or caffeine, or at least 30 minutes before. And I tell my patients, for me, since I've been doing this for so long, I keep a cup of water and my thyroid medicine at my bedside. So the second I sit up, it's now tuned into me. I take that thyroid and I drink my full cup, which we all should do anyway, first thing in the morning to get us hydrated, right?
Yes.
And so I get my first cup done for the day, and I've had my thyroid. And by the time I get to the kitchen and get everything ready, it's been over 30 minutes.
Yeah. And then, is there a specific time to draw your labs? Because I've always wondered this, and I don't even know. This question just popped in my head. So if I take let's say I do take my medicine in the morning, and I take my thyroid medicine at, arbitrary number, 7:00, but then I have a lab draw at 8. Is that going to mess with your lab?
No, that's a good question. So no, technically not, because thyroid is going to be more stable over time, and it's not something that's going to peak that fast, because it has to pass to the liver and do all these things. There are some medications, that you do have to that you do have to do.
Okay.
That you want a trough or a peak depending. Thyroid is definitely not one of those.
Okay. I was just curious.
No, that's
about
a good question.
I was like, I wonder if my labs are skewed because I take it right before.
Now, if you miss some doses, yes, I mean several doses, but if you take it right before, it's not going to jump into your system that fast. It doesn't work that way. As like we just said, it can take up to 6 weeks for a change. So that's not going to make it change.
Yeah. So I'm more versed on thyroid stuff, and I know we touched a little bit about estrogen, testosterone, and things like that. Is there anything else about that type of hormone that you want to relay to anyone? Because I don't know much about that other than what I've experienced. Is there anything?
I mean, yes, I believe, especially young ladies, if you're having any symptoms, and we don't talk enough about hormones and how they change our bodies. And so, in their 30s, in your late 30s, even young 30s to 40s, things start to change. And yes, it is a normal aging process, but that doesn't mean that we have to live that way. Yes, females, we will go to menopause. Yes, men, your testosterone will decrease over time, but you don't have to live that way. It does make us feel bad. And I found that women in their late 30s and early 40s, when they're perimenopausal, start developing anxiety, insomnia. And the first thing that we do is we put them on sleeping medication and antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications. That was me. And it frustrates me because it's a natural hormone. All I have to do is check your hormones and give you a small dose of a natural hormone that our body has. And you can feel better without taking these other medications. And those medications are good medications. I'm not saying that people shouldn't take them. They are there for a reason. But why not check our
other
hormones
causes.
and other metabolic reasons?
Like, why are you feeling this way? And if there is no cause and your hormones are all leveled, then maybe you are a little depressed or a little anxious, and let me fix that, versus now we found the cause, let's treat the cause. Exactly. And that's why I love you as a practitioner, because you have always been like, wait, we got to figure out what's going on here. So speaking a little bit about that, tell everyone, if you are in Huntsville, and I know I do have some listeners that are not in Huntsville, like what kind of practice, because your practice is different than just a doctor's office. So what kind of practice are y'all running at Advanced Life Care?
So we are a direct primary care. So direct primary care is a primary care office. We treat from, 0 to all ages. But we're a little bit different is that I don't take health insurance. Okay. So I choose, and direct primary care is kind of the new wave of primary care. Insurance companies, if I choose to become part of an insurance company, they dictate to me how much I get paid per visit, and then what I can and can't do. And I have to see so many patients. It's a long list of things I have to do. Well, me as a provider, that's not how I treat my patients.
No, you want to treat patients.
I want to take care of my patients. So, I don't have, and because you only get paid this certain amount, and then you have to file for it. And there's all these, it takes a long time, 90 days to 6 months to get paid from these insurance companies. That's a lot of overhead for a staff. So DPC, or direct primary care, is very small staff. It's normally the provider and their assistant or a receptionist. And we limit our practice. So we only take a small amount of patients, and we cap, because I give each one of my patients 30 minutes to an hour every time they come see me. And if they need more than an hour, we get that. I also do telemedicine. And so then they have access to me all the time through our after hours number, because you're going to have questions in the middle of the night. You can email me, because that's how we should have open communication. Yeah. And so I get to practice medicine the way I've always wanted to practice. I get to sit down. I know every one of my patients' names. I can tell you about their family. And that's how we should practice medicine, because I'm going to notice those small changes. Yeah. Because I am sitting down and with you all the time and really paying attention to you. So we're a little bit different in that aspect. And here in Huntsville, a lot of people are very fortunate to have decent health care. But it's changing. So when I lived in New York City for 9 years, yes, I had decent health care. I worked for one of the big hospitals there. However, I didn't have time to go to the doctor. So I joined a DPC, and I paid that small monthly fee. So here at our clinic, it's $70 a month, and there's no copays.
Which to me is not that much, because there are people charging, I think like $500 a month or $300 a month. And I'm just like, whoa.
Some of the practice they call VIP or concierge. And we're almost like concierge in the fact that you're treated like your VIP concierge. We just don't charge those prices. So they have like $1,800 or $2,000 upfront per year.
And just like Kari was talking about earlier, like she goes to these not clinics, but labs and these local hospitals, and they get deals so that people who come to her that don't have insurance don't have to pay those $100, $200 every time you get a lab draw. Like she said earlier, a full thyroid panel was $10 for someone uninsured, which is a huge thing.
It's huge, because then you're going to more likely actually be healthier, right?
And be compliant.
Right, exactly. Be compliant, but also be proactive.
Yeah. So are you still taking patients if there is someone in Huntsville listening to this?
We are still taking patients.
Okay.
We are getting close to being capped, which is great. Our business has grown substantially over the pandemic.
Yeah.
Fortunately, because I think people realize they do need somebody.
Yeah.
Don't just run to an urgent care as where, we need someone to actually sit down and pay attention to our overall health. So yes, we are still taking patients.
And where can they reach you if they want to find you?
They can go to our website, www.advancedlifecarehsv.com, or call the office 256-882-6555.
And Kari, I have loved this conversation. We will definitely have a part 2 because I'm sure I will have questions after this episode airs. But is there anything else that you want to say to the listeners?
No. Be healthy and listen to your body.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to like, rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Get this out to more people so that they can hear about this. And until next time, guys, bye.